I was born on Lincoln's birthday in 1941. My brother Ron and I lived with our parents Sam and Frida Israel above our neighborhood grocery store until I was 12. Most of you will be surprised to learn that I was very shy until I went to college. I blossomed at Temple University and found my creative voice, writing skits and parodies there and as head dramatics counselor at a summer camp. After graduating in 1961, I began working in Baltimore as a dental hygienist. My life changed that summer when I went to my brother's wedding in Minneapolis. My sister-in-law fixed me up with her cousin Howard. It was love at first sight. We got married within the year and moved to Minnesota. In 1965, our son Jay was born, and 17 months later, our daughter Margie arrived. We moved to Houston in 1970 as there were many opportunities here. And besides, it was a lot warmer than the sub-zero temperatures in frigid Minnesota. Howard had begun manufacturing and retailing office furniture. I joined him in 1975. Among our clients were the Egyptian, Chinese, Indian, Pakistani, and Russian consulates, which I furnished. We hired a young Indian man to replace our controller. In 1982, he told me he was getting married. He didn't know who his fiancée would be, but he wanted me to come to the wedding in India. I was 41 and had never been out of the country. My first trip was to that exotic land. Before we left, the engagement was broken, so I helped him find a new bride once we got there. Keeping a journal and taking photos started me on a side career as a photojournalist, author, and publisher. I loved genealogy and met two South African cousins when they visited America. One became mayor of Johannesburg in 1986 during that city's centenary, and he invited me to his son's bar mitzvah taking place then. I went, and while there interviewed officials in Soweto and other townships, then traveled to Cape Town to interview MPs in all three parliaments. Most meaningful was a visit to Mahatma Gandhi's first ashram near Durban, where he developed nonviolent resistance. Gandhi's grandson Arun was in America with his wife. When I called him, Arun said he was born and lived in the ashram as his father had continued the work that the Mahatma had begun there. Arun, his wife, and I formed a close bond and adopted each other as family. I often traveled with them, covering his speeches. When Houston's economy collapsed in the 1980s, many businesses closed, and ours was one of them. I had a series of jobs. In 1991, a Canadian newspaper asked me to photograph a small press conference at the Rothko Chapel. It was the day before the Carter Manil Human Rights Prize, and Nelson Mandela was the keynote speaker. A year after he was released from prison, and several before he became president of South Africa. In the ensuing years, I joined several organizations, including the Partnerships World Trade Division. I spent time with a delegation from Abu Dhabi who visited in 1993. They were interested in becoming a Houston sister city, and I led the efforts with wonderful committee members. The proposal was approved in 2001 and signed the following year in the UAE. I was the founding president of the Houston Abu Dhabi Sister City Association and later became president of Sister Cities of Houston, serving for 8 years. Writing song parodies came in handy when Sutapa Ghosh, a filmmaker and producer, asked me to be the lyricist for 8 songs on the Indian superstar Sonu Nigam's English language album. She also invited me to be a board member on the Indian Film Festival of Houston, and I'm on the advisory committee for the HCC Filmmaking School as well. When people heard about my Indian trip, they urged me to convert my journal into a book. After many rewrites of Finding a Bride and Other Adventures of a Jewish Mother in India, my own publishing company released it 32 years later. It was launched at the Ismaili Center. I'm a late bloomer. My first award came when I was in my 70s. In February, my daughter Margie and I went to South Africa for the Sister Cities International Africa Summit, where I was named an African Elder. Some people call me their Jewish mother, and my relationships with my own family, Jay and Margie, their spouses Karen and David, and grandchildren Rachel, Josh, and Harry are very close. Many of you remember my late husband, Howard. He loved coming to Sister Cities events. The original Sister Cities concerts were memorials to those who were lost during 9/11. I believe in living by the Jewish principle Tikkun Olam, which loosely translates as mending the world. Sister Cities of Houston is also trying to make the world a better place for all of us. Music is universal and healing. Thank you, Sister Cities of Houston, fellow board members, and Susan Young, our president. I share this with all of you.